Welcome back to Beyond the Bolter. This is where we take the mountain of competitive data, run it through the forge, and deliver the high-octane insights you need to dominate the current meta. Today, we're tackling a topic that has set the community on fire. But before we deploy, do us a favor. Hit that subscribe button and join the conversation in the comments. Your feedback drives our future episodes. Now, let's get into it. If you're running Adeptus Astartes in the competitive circuit right now, the loudest conversation in the room isn't about your massive 300-point heavy hitters.
Not at all.
No, it's laser-focused, on a unit that, let's be honest, many of us just dismissed as a kind of overly complicated flying brick when it first came out.
That is absolutely the current reality, yeah.
I mean, the shift we saw after the December 2025 balanced data slate?
Yeah, the MathHammer update.
It was seismic.
Right.
And you're right, the tectonic plates didn't move because the Land Raider got a little bit cheaper. They moved because the Primaris Storm Speeder platform, a vehicle that spent, months just sitting on hobby shelves.
Or in the foam tray, yeah.
It suddenly ascended. And it didn't just become, situationally good. It became the mathematical keystone of high-level competitive lists for Space Marines.
And we're not even talking about all three versions of it equally. We're going deep, really deep, in one specific flavor today, the Thunderstrike. This one unit, just through one simple ability, has basically solved a core math problem that has plagued Space Marines since the start of 10th edition. That nagging difficulty of cracking high-toughness targets.
Exactly. And that's really the mission for this deep dive. We're going to move way beyond just reading a datasheet on the surface. We're going to synthesize the mathematical modeling, the surprisingly deep lore behind this thing.
I was shocked at how much there was.
Right? Connecting it all the way back to the Imperium's deepest technological history. And then we'll get into the granular tactical breakdowns you need to really maximize its efficiency.
And our goal is to show you exactly how this vehicle, especially a Thunderstrike, lets your mid-strength weapons, your staple plasma incinerators, your heavy bolters, how it lets them stay lethally relevant against the toughness 10, toughness 12 armor that just defines the whole meta right now. The big takeaway, the thing we really want you to internalize by the end of this, is that the Storm Speeder is not designed to be your primary damage dealer. Its true identity is as a force multiplier for a relatively low points cost. It's the one unit that makes every single other ranged unit in your army, say, 20 to 50% more efficient against the single biggest threat your opponent puts on the table.
So let's start with the Techno-Arcana, because to really understand how it performs, I think you first have to understand the pedigree. You have to understand the tech that actually keeps this thing in the air.
Absolutely. So we have to begin with the history, right? Because the Storm Speeder isn't a brand new blueprint out of nowhere. It's the direct spiritual successor to one of the most recognizable airframes in the entire Imperial military.
The Land Speeder.
The classic Land Speeder. It is essential context. The original Land Speeder was, in a lot of ways, an accident of discovery by the legendary techno-archaeologist Arkham Land.
Right, hence the name.
Exactly. His findings, which he unearthed deep within the Liber Omnis on Mars, gave the Imperium the standard template construct of the STC data for anti-gravitic plates.
And that data gave them this fast, light reconnaissance vehicle. But what were the inherent limitations baked into that ancient STC tech?
The original Land Speeder was just a study in compromise. It was a pure glass cannon.
Right.
The design had to prioritize speed and lift, which demanded an exceptionally light chassis. It was often open top, with an exposed crew and minimal armor. It relied completely on its blistering speed to survive.
So you had to go fast or you were dead.
Pretty much. And crucially, the limitations of that original STC anti-grav suspension, it really restricted the size, the weight, and especially the recoil tolerance of any weapon it could carry.
Oh, okay.
So trying to mount something like a modern Thunderstrike last talon or a massive missile turret,
yeah,
it would have just crushed the suspension or, destabilized the craft so badly it'd be useless.
So, ancient efficiency, but married to these really ancient limitations. The Land Speeder was great for zipping around and scouting, but not for getting into a slugging match with a Land Raider.
Not at all.
Okay, so now enter Archimagus Belisarius Call, the great innovator of the Primus era. What was the technological leap that he introduced that just fundamentally changed the speeder's role on the battlefield?
Cole integrated repulsor field technology into the design. This is the monument shift.
The same tech from the tanks.
Exactly. The Storm Speeder doesn't just rely on those ancient anti-grav plates for lift anymore. It's a hybrid system. It generates a far more powerful localized gravitic footprint.
So what does that mean in, layman's terms?
The simple way to think about it is that the field actively crushes the air beneath the vehicle. It generates this massive ground effect and enough thrust to support a significantly heavier, much more armored chassis.
And that right there, that immediately connects the tech to the unit's actual profile on the tabletop. It's one of the most satisfying bits of lore to rules I've seen.
It really is. That heavier profile, the toughness 9, the 11 wounds, is a direct result of this repulsor field technology. It's not that light scout anymore. It's basically a light hover tank built on a whole new principle of lift. Precisely, and that new principle allows it to carry those massive turret-mounted weapon systems we see across all the variants, weapons that would have been totally impossible for a classic land speeder pattern.
The technology dictated the battlefield profile, making it so much more survivable and stable than its predecessor. Okay, this is where we get into that really fascinating deep lore segment I was reading about, the call land identity theory.
Ah, yes.
This sounds like something the Mechanicus logist would just argue about for centuries over, lukewarm nutrient paste.
Oh, they absolutely do. It's a huge and, frankly, somewhat heretical debate within the Mechanicus. The core hypothesis is that Call's vast biological memory banks, the repository of all the knowledge he's assimilated over 10,000 years,
right?
They may actually contain the absorbed personality or even the direct functional memory trace of Arcan Land himself.
Wait, how would that even be possible? Did he just, download his brain?
Well, the speculation revolves around Call's great work, this project where he's constantly, assimilating and integrating ancient intelligences, people like the venerable tech priest Ezekiel Sedane. If Call managed to integrate Land's operational knowledge or maybe even a fragment of his personality into his own consciousness,
then the Storm Speeder isn't just Call modifying an old blueprint. It's the original inventor, Arcan Land, effectively reborn as a sort of digital ghost inside Call's head, designing the next-gen model with modern repulsor-era technology.
That is the implication. It elevates the speeder from just an imitation to a direct iterative evolution. It's designed by the original creative mind, but repurposed and modernized for the Primaris era.
Wow.
Even the name change, from Land Speeder to Storm Speeder, it might reflect that synthesis. It respects Land's initial anti-grav concept while acknowledging the technological storm of repulsor tech that Call brought to the table. It's a true fusion.
That's a wonderful piece of background. So let's look at how that fusion shows up in the physical structure and the staffing of the vehicle. There's a really crucial difference in the crew configuration from the original speeder.
A huge one. The old one was notorious for its exposed cockpit.
Right, the two guys just sitting out in the open.
Yeah, the Storm Speeder has a fully enclosed, armored cockpit, and unlike the original, which could sometimes be operated by a single Marine, the Storm Speeder requires 2 dedicated Primus Marines, a pilot and a gunner.
And why the need for 2 full Primus crew? Is it just redundancy?
No, it comes down to the sheer complexity of the integrated systems and the high-speed operational needs. The pilot is constantly managing these sophisticated pulsar fields and high-speed maneuvers. I mean, remember, this is a vehicle moving 14 inches and flying over buildings.
A lot to handle.
A lot to handle. And at the same time, the gunner is managing multiple weapon systems, the Las Talon, the missile launcher, the rocket pods, all requiring independent target acquisition and split-second firing solutions.
So that 2-man coordination is the in-universe justification for the unit's baseline ballistic skill of 3+, which, as we know, often gets modified down to a 2+ when in wave.
That's it. The design isn't just about safety, it's a reflection of the unit's mechanical complexity and its role as a high-precision, high-speed gun platform that absolutely positively must hit its target.
Okay, so let's move from the lore and the tech pedigree to the raw data.
Yeah, because the combat performance of this thing, it really hinges entirely on that shared chassis profile. This profile dictates everything regardless of which guns it's carrying. It does, and we should break down those critical numbers because a few numbers here are truly game-defining. Let's start with its mobility.
We start with movement 14 in.
M14. That is just superior. It outpaces almost every single tracked armor piece in the game. It gives you aggressive early board control, flanking capability, and maybe most importantly, tactical retreat options.
And then we get to Toughness 9. You identified this as the critical breakpoint.
Absolutely. T9 is the magic number. Then you've got 11 wounds, W11. This is really high durability for its footprint, and the number is crucial because it sits just below the 12 wound degradation threshold.
Oh, that's a great point.
So a Storm Speeder on its last wound is still a 14-inch full ballistic skill threat. Its combat output does not degrade one bit until it's destroyed.
Okay, so we've got the standard 3+ save, but then the key weakness we need to flag immediately, the total lack of an invulnerable save.
A huge weakness.
And finally, OC3, Objective Control 3, which is fantastic for a fast attack unit that can just zip onto a point and contest it late game.
For sure. So let's look at how that M14 works as a defensive layer in competitive 10th edition. As you know, terrain is king.
Absolutely.
Talking about those standard dense layouts full of huge line-of-sight blocking ruins that you see in WTC or GW standard events.
Right, and most tracked vehicles, they have to slowly creep around those ruins. It takes them forever. It really limits their turn 1 options.
That is the exact vulnerability the Storm Speeder avoids because of the fly keyword. That 14-inch roof combined with fly lets the speeder use those ruins as its own personal cover. It lets you execute what a lot of players call a pop-tarting maneuver.
Okay, tell us exactly how that works operationally.
So it requires you to deploy the speeder completely hidden behind, say, an L-shaped ruin. On turn 1, you use the full 14-inch move to fly vertically straight up over the wall. You acquire a momentary line of sight to a vulnerable enemy target. You deliver your payload, apply the buff, and then you use the rest of your movement to land far enough back on the other side of the ruin, so you're outside the enemy's effective response range.
You dictate the terms. You force your opponent to move or split their fire to deal with a threat they couldn't even see a second ago. Wait a minute, though. If you expose yourself to shoot and the unit has no invuln and only 11 wounds, aren't you just guaranteeing the opponent deletes your 135 points instantly? Is that risk really worth the reward on turn 1?
That is the core question of the suicide trade calculus, which we are absolutely going to get to later. But the quick answer is yes.
Okay.
Yes, because of the threat radius. If you have a weapon with a standard 24-inch range, you're looking at a 38-inch threat radius from your deployment zone. That covers the vast majority of the midboard. If you can land one shot that unlocks 2/3 of your army, risking 135 points to eliminate a 450-point target is a fantastic trade every single time.
That makes a lot of sense. The front-loaded utility outweighs the fragility. Okay, so now let's get into the deep durability math, focusing entirely on that T9 pivot point. You're saying this one stat is the most important factor in its resilience.
T9 is a mathematically elegant threshold. Let's analyze the interaction with 3 common strength profiles that you're going to encounter.
Let's do it.
First up, small arms, your S4, S5. This is your standard bolter, your pulse rifle, even guard auto guns. Against T9, these weapons are only wounding on a 6.
So basically nothing.
Effectively, yes. The speeder is essentially immune to chip damage. You would need, 50 or 60 of these shots to reliably push even one unsaved wound through its 3+ save. It's a massive inefficiency for your opponent's battle line units to even try.
So your opponent's average infantry squad might as well not even bother targeting it.
Precisely. Next, we hit the mid-strength range, S7 to S9. This is the danger zone for the Storm Speeder.
Okay.
This includes things like autocannons, standard plasma, heavy bolters. S7 and S8 are wounding on 5s. S9 is wounding on 4s. This is the point where high-volume, mid-strength fire can absolutely strip those 11 wounds very, very quickly if the speeder is left exposed.
This is the profile you have to respect the most. And finally, the really heavy hitters, anti-tank S12 or higher.
This is its definitive Achilles heel. S12 plus weapons wound T9 on 3s, and given the speeder's complete lack of an invulnerable save, a single hit from an AP3 or AP4 anti-tank weapon will either push its save to a terrible 6+ even in cover, or just remove it entirely. It cannot survive focused anti-tank fire.
That inherent vulnerability leads right to the question of defense. You mentioned that the Armor of Contempt stratagem is, and I'm quoting you, virtually mandatory when this unit is exposed. Why is that specific 1 CP stratagem so critical?
It is the ultimate insurance policy. When you're facing high AP weapons, your 3+ save can just be completely negated.
Consider an enemy las cannon, which is typically AP3, maybe AP4, right?
If the speeder is in cover, it gets a 2+ save before you apply AP.
If that las cannon is AP4, your 3+ save is reduced to a 7+ to knee. You get no save.
You're just dead. But if you pop Armor of Contempt, you reduce that incoming AP by 1. That reduction can often be the difference between saving on a 5+ save, say in cover versus AP2, versus having no save at all. You have to budget that 1 command point for AOC whenever the speeder gets targeted by anything serious.
The speeder also offers huge strategic flexibility with its deployment because it has the deep strike ability, which is pretty rare for Space Marine vehicles.
And this flexibility is a huge part of its competitive value. You have 2 main approaches. Onboard deployment is ideal if you get the first turn or if the terrain is dense enough that you have perfect hiding spots for that Pop-Tart maneuver. This lets the speeder contribute its buff immediately on turn 1.
But sometimes you absolutely have to keep it safe. You have to avoid that turn 1 elimination.
Exactly, and for that you use Deep Strike Reserve. It's highly recommended against those dreaded Alpha Strike armies.
Guard, Knights.
Right, armies where a turn 1 elimination is a guarantee if you're not careful. By placing it in reserve, you protect those 11 fragile wounds. When it arrives on turn 2, you can place it perfectly to flank a priority target, ensuring the buff is applied when your main combat assets are also in range.
And that seems especially valuable for one of the variants.
It is. It's particularly useful for the Hammer Strike variant, which often needs to arrive within 18 inches to maximize its melt weaponry. Deep Strike guarantees it gets there.
Okay, we've laid the chassis foundation. Let's dive into the variants. While the Thunderstrike is the undisputed champ right now, the other two, the Hail Strike and the Hammer Strike, they occupy these crucial, if situational, niche roles we shouldn't overlook. Let's start with the Hail Strike, the anti-infantry specialist.
The Hail Strike's whole design brief is just pure volume and suppression. It exists to hose down light to medium infantry. The problem is it has a really difficult time justifying its points cost in a meta that's just full of T10 vehicles.
Its weaponry definitely reflects that focus, though. It's high volume, low to mid-strength fire.
Absolutely. You're looking at a huge number of shots. The Onslaught Gatling cannon gives you 8 shots at S5. 2 Fragtorm grenade launches are D6 shots each at S4, and the twin Iron Hail Heavy Stubber is another 6 shots at S4.
So potentially 20+ shots of volley.
Yeah, but critically, the AP is generally very low, mostly AP0 or AP1.
The Gatling can does have devastating wounds, which gives you a chance to spike some mortal damage through, but that's hardly a reliable anti-kank solution.
No, it's not. The low AP is the bottleneck against anything serious. Its primary utility is supposed to come from its unique ability, the Blitz ability, which is an armor penetration modification targeted specifically to infantry.
Okay, so explain the Blitz rule and how it's intended to function for our listener.
The rule says after the model has shot, you select one enemy unit, and this is key, excluding monsters or vehicles, that was hit until the end of the phase. You improve the AP of friendly Adeptus Astartes ranged attacks against that unit by 1.
So this is clearly designed to help crack elite, heavily armored infantry. You know, your Terminators, your Custodes, units that rely on high saves.
That's the theory. So let's run a classic scenario. You've got a 10-man Terminator unit nestled inside a ruin. That gives them a 1+ armor save, right? 2+ base, +1 for cover. They're saving on 2s or 3s against almost everything.
A tough nut to crack.
A very tough nut. If the Hail Strike hits them, it applies that AP1 buff. If you then also use the Space Marine stratagem Storm of Fire, which ignores cover and grants another +1 AP, the AP stacks up beautifully.
Ah.
The Terminators are suddenly facing AP2 attacks that also ignore their cover bonus, pushing them straight onto their 4+ invulnerable save. That drastically increases the lethality of just mass small arms fire.
That sounds pretty great on paper, but the consensus is that the Hail Strike still suffers from some serious competitive viability drawbacks. What are the fatal flaws? Walk us through them.
There are really three issues that hold it back from being meta-relevant. First, that target restriction. It explicitly excludes monsters and vehicles, right?
In a meta dominated by T10 plus armor, a unit that cannot help you solve the single biggest threat on the board.
It really struggles to justify its slot.
So if the Hailstrike can't help you kill a Land Raider, it's not solving that core efficiency problem we talked about.
Precisely. The second issue is redundancy. Space Marines are not lacking for anti-infantry volume. We have Aggressors, we have Inceptors, the Redemptor Dreadnought, units that also offer more flexibility. We don't really need a dedicated, restricted 135-point fast attack slot just for volume of fire. And the third is the limited cover interaction. The AP1 buff often just cancels out the enemy's cover bonus, which just returns the target to its base save. It's too conditional compared to the raw mathematical power the Thunderstrike offers universally.
Okay, so the Hailstrike is a niche specialist at best. Let's move to the Hammerstrike, the Bunker Buster. This one seems to have a much stronger claim to competitive use, especially when it's married to a specific detachment.
Oh, absolutely. The Hammerstrike is built to engage entrenched elites and light to medium transports. It sits in that sweet spot between volume and focused heavy hitting. Its weaponry is heavily skewed towards Strength 9.
Strength 9, that puts it firmly in the anti-elite and, anti-rhino space.
Correct. You've got the Hammerstrike missile launcher, that's Strength 9 AP3 D6 damage, and the Melta Destroyer, S9 AP4 D6 damage with Melta 2. S9 is fantastic against Marines and Tau targets, but here's the inherent range barrier. S9 struggles against T10 plus main battle tanks. It's wounding them on 5s.
But its special rule is incredibly potent, regardless of the target type. Tell us about the Shockwave ability, stripping cover.
The Shockwave rule is beautifully simple and universally powerful. After this model has shot, the hit enemy unit cannot have the benefit of cover until the end of the phase.
And this applies to anything.
It applies to any target type, infantry, monster, or vehicle.
So while the Hailstrike was restricted, the Hammerstrike is a universal debuff. It's using a physical shockwave to just neutralize terrain.
Yes, and here's the key mathematical equivalence we need to stress. Stripping the benefit of cover, which is a +1 to the target save, is mathematically the same as improving the AP of all subsequent friendly attacks by 1.
Right.
If you are firing las cannons, a Land Raider in cover, that pushes its 2+ save to a 1+ save, which means it saves on 2s. If the Hammerstrike hits first and strips cover, those las cannons are now hitting the Land Raider at its raw 2+ save. It makes them far more lethal.
So the Hammerstrike is utility through save negation, but where it truly shines, where it becomes a legitimate tank hunter, is when it's paired with the Firestorm Assault Force detachment.
That is the Hammerstrike's competitive apex. The Firestorm detachment rule is twofold. All ranged weapons gain assault, and they gain +1 strength when shooting within 12 inches.
And the assault keyword is massive for a unit like this. It allows for such aggressive movement.
Absolutely. Assault means the Hammerstrike can advance.
Move 14 inches plus D6 and still shoot.
That gives it an enormous threat range to close in, especially with its 18-inch Melta Destroyer, and apply that Shockwave debuff.
But you're saying the +1 strength is the real magic. That's what elevates its lethality against heavy armor.
It is. Let's break down that strength shift. It moves its entire S9 arsenal up to strength 10. And let's look at what that does against the heavy targets we see now.
Okay.
Against a standard T10 chassis like an Armiger or a Repulsor, S9 wounds on 5s, but S10 wounds on 4s.
That's a 50% increase in wound throughput.
It's a huge jump. It gets even better against, say, a T11 chassis. S9 wounds on 5s, but S10 still wounds on 5s, but it's a solid 5+, not needing a 6+. And against a Land Raider 12, S9 versus S10 is still wounding on 5s, but that 1 point of strength is often the breakpoint that makes other stratagems and buffs more efficient. The key takeaway is that for T10, it's a 50% jump.
So this temporary strength buff is absolutely critical for the Hammerstrike to close the gap on those T10 hulls, making it a viable tank threat in that one crucial detachment.
Combined with Melta 2, a Firestorm Hammer Strike becomes a legitimate close-range tank hunter, capable of eliminating cover and stripping significant wounds from heavy assets. It trades its own safety for massive focused damage output.
Okay, we've saved the best and definitely the most meta-dividing unit for this section. We're now shifting focus entirely to the Thunderstrike variant, which achieved this true notoriety following its critical December 2025 points reduction.
This unit is the premier force multiplier. It's the designated Titan Killer support unit. It really embodies the concept that targeting data is more valuable than just raw firepower.
Let's look at its own dedicated weapons first, because even its own guns are geared toward heavy targets, starting with that main missile system.
That's the Storm Fury missile. It has a great range, 48 inches, and its profile is fantastic. Strength 12, AP 3, and D6+1 damage. That S12 is the headline number.
It really is.
It allows the Speeder to wound toughness 11 and toughness 12 targets, your land raiders, your monoliths, even some large knights on a respectable 4+ par. And crucially, if you were using an S11 weapon against that T12 target, you'd still be stuck wounding on 5s. The S12 breaks that next level of resilience.
So it's designed to punch up, and it's backed up by the S9 Thunderstrike Last Talon and some twin Icarus rocket pods for a bit of extra fire. But as you said, its fame isn't its own damage. It is the target designator ability, the +1 to wound rule. We need to go into the rule sequencing very slowly here.
This is the critical piece of rules commentary in 10th edition that makes this all work. The rule is each time this model has shot, select one enemy monster or vehicle unit that was hit. Until the end of the phase, add 1 to the wound roll for suddenly Adeptus Astartes ranged attacks against that unit. The key interpretive ruling from the official commentary is about sequencing. When does a model count as having shot?
After all of its attacks are resolved.
Correct. This means the Thunderstrike does not benefit from its own +1 to wound buff during the phase it applies it. It has to resolve all its shots first, the missiles, the Last Talon, and the rockets, and then the buff is applied. It's a pure debuff unit. It marks the target for subsequent friendly units only.
That is such a crucial distinction. It is a pure support piece. The Speeder fires its few shots, and if even one attack connects, the entire rest of your army goes from being inefficient to highly lethal. And you argue this is statistically the most powerful offensive buff in the game for Space Marines right now.
I do, because it is far superior to just adding +1 strength or even +1 to hit in most anti-tank scenarios. Adding +1 strength often doesn't actually change the threshold roll you need. S9 to S10 still wounds T12 on 5s, but +1 to wound fundamentally changes the defensive profile of the enemy. It's like reducing the enemy's toughness value by 2 whole steps.
Okay, let's dive deep into the MathHammer here to really illustrate this efficiency boost. We are demonstrating exactly why +1 to wound is the solution to this high toughness meta.
Let's start at the lowest end, a humble S4 bolter shooting at a T10 tank.
S4 versus T10, that would normally only wound on 6s.
You're just generating paper cuts at that point. With the Thunderstrike buff, that S4 bolter against T10 now wounds on 5s.
That's 100% efficiency increase.
100%. You have double the number of successful wounds coming from your most basic battle line infantry, which traditionally would be completely ignored by super heavy targets. This allows your cheap, numerous units to actually contribute meaningful damage.
That is massive. It fundamentally changes the entire equation for the basic Space Marine profile. Okay, let's move to the mid-range, the ubiquitous S9 Plasma Incinerator against that same T10 tank.
S9 versus T10 normally wounds on 5s. It's a tough, frustrating grind. Even with rerolls, you are mathematically losing that fight over time. With the Thunderstrike buff, S9 versus T10 now wounds on 4s.
That's a 50% efficiency increase. You're pushing an attack that was mathematically losing into the range of being reliably lethal.
You've got it. The Thunderstrike effectively breaks the S9 versus T10 efficiency gap that has plagued Space Marines for so long.
So, if I have a unit of Hellblasters, the Thunderstrike makes them that much more effective against a T10 target.
Absolutely. And finally, let's look at the high end, the S12 las cannon shooting at a T12 Land Raider.
Okay, so S12 versus T12 usually wounds on 4s.
With the buff, S12 versus T12 wounds on 3s. That is still a significant 33% increase in efficiency, and it guarantees that your dedicated anti-tank fire hits harder and more reliably than your opponent can anticipate. The net result is that this buff transforms inefficient chip damage and frustrated S9 shooting from your entire army into focused, lethal anti-tank fire that can drag down targets like knights.
That level of pure support utility, it really makes that recent points adjustment for the Thunderstrike a genuine turning point for the whole faction.
It was the single most defining change in the December 2025 MFM update. The Thunderstrike was dropped from 150 points down to a mere 135 points.
135 points for an army-wide buff that solves your core efficiency problem. That is a stunning proposition. Let's compare that value to other units.
Compare it to units that achieve similar goals but through raw damage. The Gladiator Lancer is about 160 points, the Ballistic Dreadnought is around 140, and while the Lancer has a higher personal damage output, it can, in theory, kill a tank on its own.
Right.
The Thunderstrike's value scales exponentially across your entire list, right? If the Thunderstrike's 135 points enables your Hellblasters, your Redemptor, and your Aggressors units, totaling maybe 600 points, to kill a 450-point Imperial Knight in one turn, the Thunderstrike has generated value 3 times its own cost. It's the ultimate economic force multiplier.
The efficacy of the Storm Speeder, like any modern unit, it varies wildly depending on which detachment a commander selects. The Thunderstrike is strong everywhere, but the right detachment just unlocks its true ceiling.
Let's start with the current competitive favorite for vehicle players, the Ironstorm Spearhead. This detachment is inherently tailored for vehicles, and it offers immediate critical synergy for the Thunderstrike.
The core Ironstorm rule is that each unit gets 1 free reroll, hit, wound, or damage per phase.
And this reroll is vital for the Thunderstrike. We call it bad luck insurance. Remember, the Thunderstrike relies on a low shot count, yet 1 S12 missile, maybe a few last Talon shots to apply its critical buff. If that single decisive shot misses, the entire synergy for the turn is lost.
So, the Ironstorm reroll virtually guarantees the buff triggers.
Exactly. It guarantees the Thunderstrike hits, ensuring the target designator ability triggers regardless of how unlucky your initial roll was.
This single mechanic is why the Thunderstrike is an auto-include in competitive Ironstorm lists. It provides consistent activation.
And Ironstorm allows for some great synergy with character support too, specifically the Tech Marine.
Indeed. Commanders will frequently place a Tech Marine nearby with the Target Augury Web enhancement. This grants an aura of lethal hits to vehicles. That enhancement turns the speeder's volume of fire, like its Icarus rocket pods, into auto-wounding threats, which drastically increases the probability of landing a hit that triggers the designator, even before you consider that crucial missile shot.
Okay, moving now to the Gladius Task Force, the classic all-rounder choice. It's less focused than Ironstorm, but it offers mobility benefits that the speeder absolutely loves.
The key here is the ability to activate the Devastator Doctrine early and often, which grants advance and shoot. We talked about the 14-inch movement. Adding the Devastator Doctrine gives the speeder a massive 20-inch base movement, plus its weapon range.
So you can really get those angles. You can aggressively angle for line-of-sight shots, performing that Pop-Tart maneuver even more effectively, and ensuring the buff gets applied early in the game when those heavy enemy assets are still positioned centrally.
And Gladius offers a potent stratagem combo if a player does decide to lean into the anti-infantry role with the Hailstrike.
That's right, the Storm of Fire stratagem, which grants ignore cover and a further +1 AP. If you're running a niche Hailstrike, you use that stratagem on the unit. The Hailstrike shoots, it applies its inherent AP1 buff via Blitz. The stratagem gives another AP1. That target is now facing effectively AP2 from the speeder, which means it's effectively AP3 for the rest of your army against that infantry. It's devastating for clearing objective-holding Terminators.
And briefly, let's just revisit the Firestorm Assault Force, which you said is the domain of the Hammerstrike.
Yeah, the Firestorm detachment grants both assault and +1 strength within 12 inches.
While the Hammerstrike is the star there, the Thunderstrike is still viable. The detachment allows the speeder to self-buff its wound rolls with the Crucible of Battle Stratager, giving it a temporary +1 to wound, but its main job is still marking targets. The assault move just helps it get into position fast.
Let's turn now to the true gold standard application, the one that sealed the unit's legendary status, the LVO 2025 Victory, Mark Esser's winning Deathwatch list. It's the ultimate proof of concept for the Thunderstrike as a keystone piece.
This list brilliantly synthesized multiple rules interactions into a hyper-efficient sequence. The core mechanism was pairing the Thunderstrike with the End-Emitter Kill Team,
Right.
a unit composed of heavy intercessors, eradicators, and aggressors. These units have phenomenal mid-strength heat, S5, S6, S8, S9, but they inherently struggle against T10+.
And the Deathwatch bring a unique artifact that just turns up the volume even further, the Tome of Ectolades.
The Tome of Ectolades allows the Deathwatch commander to select a second Oath of Moment target, or gain full rerolls against a specific enemy databank target. It's essentially a force multiplier for your force multiplier. It just doubles down on efficiency.
Okay, let's detail the exact sequence that won the tournament. This is where the synergy becomes just blindingly obvious.
Step 1. The Thunderstrike uses its superior mobility to get line of sight and fires at the enemy's hardest target. A Sidon Shard, a T12 Knight, a Monolith. It must hit, applying that critical +1 to wound buff.
Okay.
Step 2. The commander places the main Oath of Moment ability on that exact same marked target, granting full rerolls to all their Space Marine hits and wounds.
So the enemy target is now suffering from two devastating debuffs at the same time, +1 to wound and full REs. That combination is just lethal.
Exactly. Step 3. The End-Emitter Kill Team with all his mid-strength weapons opens fire. And look at how their weapons perform now. Heavy Bolters S5, which normally wound T10 on 6s, now wound on 5s, and they get full rerolls on every roll. The Melter Rifles S9, which wound T10 on 5s, now wound on 4s with full rerolls. They turn inefficient chip damage into a devastating focused laser beam of death. The Thunderstrike is the keystone. It bridges that S9 versus T10 efficiency gap and turns a strong anti-infantry team into a universal solvent that can crack anything.
It's the perfect distillation of synergistic list building, triumph over just raw, self-sufficient damage. But the utility extends beyond just Codex-compliant chapters. The divergent chapters also leverage it brilliantly.
The Dark Angels, specifically their Ravenwing, have a deep affinity for speeders.
Of course.
The Dark Angels use the Company of Hunters detachment, which grants Ravenwing units the ability to advance and shoot, or shoot and fall back. This maximizes the speeder's utility by giving it mobility benefits similar to Firestorm, but without being restricted to close range.
And this is crucial for supporting their specialized plasma weaponry.
Yes, Dark Angels rely heavily on Hellblasters and Black Knights, whose plasma usually caps out at S8 or S9. The problem remains that S9 struggles against T10, T9 vehicles. The Thunderstrike Mark pushes that S8 plasma to wound T9 on 3+, and T10 on 4+. It allows the Dark Angel infantry line to obliterate heavy armor without relying on dedicated anti-tank tanks.
And finally, the Blood Angels, the quintessential melee army. How does a shooting support piece benefit them?
Blood Angels' primary weakness is often dealing with heavy shooting threats before their melee troops can close the distance. A Thunderstrike supports their mechanized assets like Bale Predators, which are often used to clear a path.
Okay.
Bale Predators often carry Flamestorm cannons, which are S6 flamers. If a Thunderstrike marks a T9 light vehicle that's blocking the advance, those S6 flamers suddenly wound that T9 target on 4s instead of 5s. It lets their anti-infantry tanks punch up and clear a path for the jump pack troops to arrive and get to their glorious close combat phase.
We have established the lineage, the stats, the math, the synergies. Now we conclude with the practical application, the operational doctrine, and the unique mentality you need to play the Thunderstrike successfully.
And we have to address the meta context one last time. Why did this unit suddenly become necessary after the December 2025 MFM update? It's because the cost reductions for T10 plus Hull, Knights, Land Raiders, Repulsors, even Orc Stompus meant the competitive board was just saturated with cheaper, heavier arms.
Exactly. The game became harder to crack than ever before. Armies relying only on S9, S10 weaponry were struggling because wounding T10 on 5s is a losing mathematical proposition over a 5-turn game.
The Thunderstrike is the necessary patch that restores the mathematical efficiency of standard Space Marine weaponry against this elevated toughness baseline. Without it, you are constantly trading down in efficiency.
Okay, so let's detail the deployment strategies again, starting with the operational steps of that Pop-Tart maneuver.
The Pop-Tart requires discipline and commitment. Step 1. Deploy the speeder completely hidden behind an L-shaped ruin. Step 2. On turn 1, use the 14-inch move in the fly keyword to hop over the wall and get a long-range angle to a high-priority target.
Right.
Step 3. Deliver your payload, apply the buff, and then use the rest of your move to land 36+ inches away or behind fresh line-of-sight blocking terrain.
This forces your opponent to dedicate their long-range, high AP resources to deal with a fleet-leading threat. And what about the alternative, the flank reserve?
You use the Deep Strike ability when facing highly aggressive long-range Alpha Strike armies, or if the terrain is sparse. Keeping it in reserve until turn 2 protects those 11 fragile wounds, and when it arrives on the extreme flank, you get perfect uncontested positioning. It forces your opponent to either screen their backfield expertly or divert significant anti-tank firepower away from your front line, which dilutes their overall strength on the turn it arrives.
Target priority matrix is everything for the Thunderstrike. You cannot waste this buff on the wrong target since you only get one shot per phase. What is the commander's priority list?
Priority 1 is paramount. T10 to T12 vehicles or monsters. This is where the buff moves the wound roll from a 5+ to a 4+ R, or 4+ to a 3+ R. This is the highest value application, targeting land raiders, knights, monoliths. This is the only place you should be looking on turn 1 or 2.
And what about T9 targets like rhinos or light transports?
Priority 2, T9 light vehicles. You only target these if your primary damage dealers are significantly weaker, like S6 or S8 weapons.
Yeah.
S9 weapons already wound T9 on 4s, so the buff to 3s is good, but the proportional value gain is far less dramatic than the jump from a 5+ to a 4+ against the T10 target.
And we must avoid targeting infantry.
Absolutely correct. The buff is explicitly restricted to monsters and vehicles. Wasting the Thunderstrike's single shot on infantry or low-toughness targets is a critical tactical failure that effectively throws away the entire unit's utility for the turn.
Finally, let's just confirm the logic of the suicide trade. This unit is not designed for long-term survival, and the commander has to embrace that disposability.
The commander must accept that the Storm Speeder is often a one-turn wonder. Its role is functional, not durable. You have to prioritize the delivery of the buff over the survival of the chassis.
Okay.
The value proposition is simple and clear. If your Thunderstrike, all 135 points of it, exposes itself to mark a 450-point Knight Castellan, and that mark enables the rest of your army, who are struggling to wound on 5 fear, to kill that knight in a single turn, the trade is overwhelmingly successful for you. The speeder generated more than 3 times its own value in damage facilitation.
So its value is completely front-loaded. It's achieved upon activation. You shouldn't play cautiously with it. You should play aggressively to ensure that target designator is used against the highest priority threat as early as you possibly can.
Get the mark, get the value, accept the sacrifice. That is the operational doctrine in a nutshell.
So what does this all mean in the end? We've seen this fascinating transformation of the Primaris Storm Speeder from a unit that was met with, indifference, that flying brick nobody bothered with, to a strategic key that dictates competitive matchups across multiple detachments.
It successfully bridges the efficiency gap within the Space Marine arsenal. It addresses that inherent imbalance between the ubiquitous bolter profile and the specialized lascan. By making the middle of your army relevant against the heaviest armor, this lets commanders build diverse, balanced lists instead of just relying on expensive, self-sufficient anti-tank spam. The source material is clear on this. Superior firepower is useless without the targeting data to apply it effectively, and the Storm Speeder provides exactly that necessary data. It's the eyes, the targeter, and the army-wide multiplier all in one inexpensive package. Its success is not measured by its own, 3 or 4 damage output. It's a measure by the extra 20 or 30 wounds it enables from the rest of the army. It's a beautifully efficient piece of competitive design.
So here is a final provocative thought for you to chew on. If a unit's highest competitive value comes not from its raw damage output, but purely from its ability to enhance the efficiency of every other unit in the army, does this mark a permanent shift towards synergistic force multiplication list building? Are we forever moving away from reliance on self-sufficient high-damage threats toward a model where the cheapest units provide that critical efficiency gap? And what other overlooked inexpensive units in the game might be hiding similar hidden synergies, just waiting for a minor points adjustment to unlock their true army-wide potential?
That changes the way you look at every datasheet.
Food for thought indeed. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.